Philosophy and war. Socrates in the Peloponnesian conflict. The Peloponnesian War was a dark period in Greek history, but it was also a time of intense intellectual reflection, particularly in Athens. While the war raged, Socrates, one of Athens' most remarkable philosophers, observed the conflict with a critical eye. His questions about morality, justice, and the nature of power provided a counterpoint to the ambition and violence that defined the era. Socrates' life and philosophy were deeply intertwined with the events of the war, shaping his thoughts and leading him to challenge Athenian society at a time when its values and ideals were in flux. Part 1. Socrates the Soldier Experience on the Battlefield. Before Socrates became known for his philosophical pursuits, he served as a hoplite or foot soldier in the Athenian army. Socrates fought bravely in several battles, including Potidaea, Delium, and Amphipolis, where he demonstrated remarkable courage and resilience. His military service allowed him to observe the horrors of war firsthand, an experience that influenced his later questioning of human nature, bravery, and virtue. In battle, Socrates was known for his calm and stoic demeanor. His fellow soldiers admired his ability to remain unfazed in the face of danger, an attitude he would later embody in his philosophical teachings. At Potidaea, he famously saved the life of Alcibiades, the young, ambitious Athenian general whose actions would later play a crucial role in the war. Socrates' conduct on the battlefield earned him respect, but it also provided him with insights into human behavior under extreme conditions. Insights that would shape his view of courage and the role of the individual within society. Socrates' experiences in war left him questioning the ideals that led men to kill and die for power, honor, or glory. This introspection became a foundation for his philosophy, as he sought to understand the values and motivations that drove people, especially in a society as ambitious as Athens. Part 2. Questioning Athenian values, justice, honor, and ambition. As the Peloponnesian War dragged on, Socrates observed how the conflict eroded the moral fabric of Athenian society. He saw firsthand how political leaders manipulated public opinion to serve their ambitions, often at the expense of justice and the common good. Socrates became critical of the Athenian assembly, where populist leaders swayed decisions with rhetorical skill rather than ethical reasoning. Socrates often asked questions that challenged the status quo, forcing his fellow Athenians to consider the nature of justice, honor, and virtue. Through his Socratic method, a form of questioning designed to stimulate critical thinking and reveal contradictions, he would engage people in public places, questioning the motivations behind their beliefs and actions. He was especially critical of those who pursued personal glory at the expense of ethical principles, as he believed that such ambition ultimately harmed both the individual and the community. In a time when Athens was consumed by imperial ambitions, Socrates' questions struck at the heart of the city's identity. He questioned whether the pursuit of power and dominance was truly noble and whether those who led Athens were genuinely motivated by the welfare of the people. Socrates' critiques were not intended to undermine the state but to encourage a deeper understanding of what it meant to lead a virtuous life, both individually and collectively. His philosophy urged Athenians to look beyond superficial success and examine the moral foundations of their actions. Part 3. Socrates and the Influence of Alcibiades. Socrates' relationship with Alcibiades, one of the most controversial figures of the Peloponnesian War, exemplifies the philosopher's engagement with Athens' political and social issues. Alcibiades, a charismatic and ambitious young leader, was initially a student of Socrates. The two shared a complex bond, with Socrates seeing potential in Alcibiades' intelligence and energy, but also fearing the young man's susceptibility to ambition and vanity. Socrates tried to instill in Alcibiades a sense of ethical responsibility and self-restraint, warning him of the dangers of unchecked ambition. Despite Socrates' influence, Alcibiades pursued a career driven by personal glory and power, often making reckless decisions that destabilized Athens. His leadership of the Sicilian expedition, a disastrous campaign meant to expand Athens' empire, epitomized the hubris that Socrates warned against. The expedition ended in catastrophe, weakening Athens and turning the tide of the war in Sparta's favor. Alcibiades' rise and fall served as a powerful example of the danger Socrates saw in Athenian society's focus on power and fame. Although Socrates could not prevent Alcibiades from following his path of ambition, his relationship with the young general highlighted Socrates' role as a moral conscience within Athens, even as the city itself moved further from the values he espoused. Part 4. Socrates' Reflections on Democracy and the Athenian Assembly. Socrates was a vocal critic of the Athenian democracy, particularly the way decisions were made in the assembly. He saw how easily the public could be swayed by charismatic leaders who appealed to emotions rather than reasoned debate. To Socrates, democracy's weakness lay in its vulnerability to manipulation, where leaders like Cleon and Alcibiades could influence the masses to support dangerous or self-serving policies. Socrates believed that the well-being of the city should be entrusted to those with knowledge and wisdom, rather than allowing the uninformed majority to make crucial decisions. He often used his method of questioning to expose the ignorance of those who claimed to know what was best for Athens, showing that many leaders lacked the ethical foundation needed to govern wisely. His critiques, however, were not anti-democratic in essence but rather a call for a more informed and morally guided approach to governance. Socrates' skepticism about democracy put him at odds with many Athenians, especially as the city struggled with the consequences of its imperial ambitions. His questioning of Athens' political system would later contribute to the charges brought against him in his trial, as his challenges to authority were perceived as undermining the stability of the state. Part 5. Socrates' Philosophy in a Time of Crisis. As Athens suffered military defeats and social upheaval, Socrates' philosophy provided a moral framework that resonated with those questioning the purpose and value of the city's ambitions. His focus on personal virtue, self-knowledge, and ethical conduct contrasted sharply with the brutality and pragmatism of war. While leaders called for loyalty and sacrifice, Socrates encouraged individuals to examine their motives and consider the true meaning of courage and honor. Socrates argued that true courage was not found in blind loyalty to the state, but in the commitment to pursue virtue and wisdom, even at personal risk. He believed that understanding oneself and one's purpose was the path to a fulfilling life, a message that offered comfort to Athenians weary of the endless cycle of war and suffering. His teachings inspired a new way of thinking about personal responsibility and ethics, emphasizing that the greatest victory lay not in conquest but in the cultivation of a virtuous soul. Part 6. The Trial and Death of Socrates. In the years following the end of the Peloponnesian War, Athens was in a state of turmoil and introspection. Disillusioned by the war and suffering from internal strife, many Athenians sought to assign blame for the city's decline. Socrates, with his relentless questioning and critique of traditional values, became a convenient scapegoat. In 399 BCE, he was charged with corrupting the youth and impiety, failing to worship the gods of the state and introducing new deities. At his trial, Socrates defended his life's work, arguing that he had only encouraged Athenians to think critically and pursue virtue. He famously declared that the unexamined life is not worth living, emphasizing his commitment to philosophy and ethical inquiry. Despite his defense, the jury found him guilty, and he was sentenced to death by consuming a cup of hemlock. Socrates' trial and execution marked the end of an era for Athens. His death was a stark reminder of the consequences of intellectual and moral independence in a city struggling to redefine itself after the devastation of war. Socrates' willingness to die for his beliefs underscored the values he had tried to instill: courage, integrity, and the pursuit of truth above all else. Part 7. The Legacy of Socratic Philosophy. The legacy of Socrates continued to shape Greek thought long after his death. His student Plato immortalized Socrates' teachings in a series of dialogues, preserving his ideas on ethics, justice, and the role of the philosopher. Socrates' questioning of Athenian values and his emphasis on self-examination became foundational to Western philosophy, inspiring future generations to explore the nature of knowledge, morality, and the good life. The lessons Socrates imparted during the Peloponnesian War, his critiques of ambition, his skepticism of unrestrained democracy, and his call for ethical leadership, resonated in a society marked by war's toll. His philosophy served as a guide for